Hello, welcome to the Elevate Dataviz Show, episode number 5. We're here to explore current topics in data visualization, share our creative inspiration, and the tools and techniques that we are all experimenting with as practicing information designers. Today, we're going to be sharing our top tips to build a portfolio of Dataviz projects, even when you don't have an employer or clients to use. I'm Allie Torben. We also have Duncan Gear, Gabrielle Marit, and Will Chase. Before we jump into our topic today, this show is supported by members of the Elevate Dataviz learning community who get the opportunity to watch and ask questions live. If you'd like to do that and you want to level up your Dataviz skills in a supportive community, check out elevatedataviz.com. Okay, so our topic, creating a Dataviz portfolio creating a portfolio with projects. How do you find things to work on so that you have fodder to use for your portfolio? That's our big question. Maybe it would be good first to talk about, why are we talking about this? Is this a problem? And I would like to say yes, as someone who did it. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's something that we get asked a lot about during our office hours sessions and in our Slack community. So this definitely seems to be a problem that people are facing. How do I pick what to work on? And then how do I get literally anyone to care about the things that I have picked to work on, to look at it,
Yeah, it is hard. And it's nobody really talks about where to find projects, or they say like, oh, just look for a data set, and they might like point you to some repository, be like, bye, good luck. Just make something. Just get started. But that's really hard. So I thought we could go around and maybe talk about or talk about how you started your portfolio, and or your top tip for doing that. Anybody want to go first? I am prepared to go first if nobody wants to jump in.
I'll let you go first. Why don't you go first? You're already talking. So plus on my screen, it'll be clockwise then. It'll be, So.
Okay, we'll try to go in Will's clockwise circle.
Yes.
Okay, so for me, I'll give you a quick background. I started getting into Dataviz in about 2018, I guess late 2017. And I needed to build a portfolio so that I could start applying to jobs. And I kind of just flailed about for a little while. And I want to just tell you the couple of things that, looking retrospectively, worked really well. One of them was that I was looking to see what tools jobs were using, and I saw Mapbox on one of them. And so I started teaching myself how to use Mapbox. And because I thought their help files were really helpful, but I didn't feel like they did that great of a job kind of giving people quick start guides, like how do you actually start using it just real quick, like explain the interface really quick. I made my own quick start guide. And as part of my podcast, I was promoting on the podcast, like, hey, if you want to get started on Mapbox, you can use this quick start guide course that I created. It was like, create your first map in under 30 minutes, something like that. And by doing that tutorial, I had to use a map as part of the course, something for people to build. So whatever I built from the course was the first piece in my portfolio. And I think I just pulled one of those it was the New York City tree health public data set. So we were just putting dots on a map, and then it was colored by how healthy each tree was. So it was super basic, but it was kind of meeting a need for me to learn the tool. Plus, it was giving me something kind of cool and nice to look at in my portfolio, because Mapbox maps are really nice. So the TLDR of that is that try to think if you can kind of piggyback off of a tool to create a visualization. And the way that also catapulted my career is Mapbox saw the course and they started sending their employees, their new hires, to take that course.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's a
high
vote of
praise.
confidence.
Yeah,
right?
that
That's
was high praise.
hilarious.
I know, isn't that funny? I was getting people like with Mapbox emails, like enrolling. I was like, what's happening? And someone reached out to me and was like, oh yeah, they're like directing us to this as part of the onboarding. So I thought that was
Nice.
kind of cool. And they also reached out to me to start actually making tutorials. So they were actually my first freelancing client, I think.
How did they find out about it? Do you know?
I think, I think I might have tagged. That's a good question. I shared it, sharing it on my podcast, but also sharing it on Twitter. And I think I tagged Mapbox. So, they're very on Twitter. I don't know if it's like this anymore, but a few years ago, they're like super into building their Mapbox community. So they were always responding to times they were tagged and commenting on it and sharing things. So I think employees kind of found it through that. And, it got me freelance work through it.
I think this is a really, really important learning that people can take away from this, which is like if you use somebody's data or if you use their tool or something like that, like tag them, publish it, tag them, tell them about it, give them the opportunity to see it, because most times people will then get really excited about it and they will retweet it and bring it to a broader audience themselves, rather than going and asking for permission to do something. Just find some data that's open or a tool that's open, do something with it, and then publish it and tag people. Like that is so much of a quicker way to, I don't know, maybe potentially getting some interest on it.
Yeah. And I would like to highlight the fact that I would try to go smaller rather than bigger. Like Mapbox, how big was it at that time? I want to say they had maybe in the range of like 20 or 30,000 followers. So that is pretty big. I didn't really expect them to respond. I think going smaller and more niche is better because you have more of a chance of someone to actually engage with you instead of just like yelling into a void. One way I did do that is kind of going down more this map route. I was just looking around the DC open data sets and I found this one about bike routes, and they would label the bike route how safe it was. So I was thinking, oh, that's actually a really interesting data set. I wonder if I could kind of try to map this out and then create certain routes, like the safest routes to go through the city. So I did that, and I tweeted it out, and I think I tagged a couple of DC bike safety, bike interest accounts. And then one of them actually reached out and said, hey, can we publish this as a blog on our website? I'm like, oh yeah, so that's great. So anytime you can tag someone who's super niche, I think they get really excited about it, like you said.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
will give you a little bit more clout because I can add that. I added that to my portfolio, and rather than it just being, oh, here's a map that I made with open data sets, it's like, here's a map that I made and was also published on this, secondary site who thought it was also good. So those are my two big tips, two of the things that really had a good bang for your buck in terms of creating a portfolio kind of from nothing, is looking at the open data sets and how they could relate to something niche around you and share it and tag them.
Can we precise that when we talk about tagging people, just like Ali did, it's either the tool that she used or the person that it could be useful to? She's not tagging a wide range of random people because it gives her more visibility. Because it is done sometimes.
Spam.
You'll see people spamming and tagging like every famous designer, especially on Instagram. It's a very Instagram thing to do. Let's all avoid that. I think unless you're specifically inspired by someone and you want to be like, I was inspired by that person because the work is so close, I think that's great.
That's a good point. Don't spam tag.
Don't spam tag.
Yeah, but I do like the idea of tagging, especially if it is, like you said, the data or the company, like the tool. A lot of times I think the tool, especially if it's like not a commercial tool, I find that you have like really like better responses with that. So, a lot of my experience was using like different programming languages, which have like accounts for like D3 has an account, R has an account or whatever, but it's not necessarily like a company. So you get a little bit less of the like, I don't know, corporatized, like, use our tool promotion, which is not necessarily bad, but I feel like a lot of the communities that spring up around like nonprofit things tend to be more engaged, and it doesn't sound, you know, like if they retweet you like, oh, great job, whatever, it doesn't sound like someone's trying to sell you something. So it can be a nice way, like if you can find a community that is just organic, I think that's definitely a plus.
Yeah, I mean, you know, every tool creator's nightmare is that nobody uses their tool. So if you're using their tool, and tell them about it. You know, with my tool creator's hat on, like, I love it when people make things with the Loud Numbers VCV Rack module, you know, the sonification module that I made for that. And whenever anyone tweets me literally anything with that, I will definitely retweet that, because, you know, it's cool. I'm really excited about somebody using something that I made to make something themselves. I think that's awesome.
Or who is inspired by you. That happens too. Like sometimes you make a type being like, I was inspired by Ali and I did a story on this. I think it's always flattering, to be honest, and it's exciting, and we'll probably all retweet you or Instagram you if you do that, because it's great. Like we're happy if we get you excited about Dataviz.
Yeah, I will also add, so another really good thing, like kind of thing to tag if you're doing this, is if you followed a tutorial. So like if you found someone's blog and they wrote a tutorial and you use that to help you, that's a really good one. Like tag that person specifically and link to their blog and say, oh, I followed this great tutorial by XYZ and here's what I came up with. Because one of the things that I did early on in my portfolio was creating blogs about how to make generative art. And I used to get, you know, tons of people. Still, I get people tagging me about following along with my blog post and posting the art that they made. And, you know, I love that stuff and always engage with it. So
that's interesting that you had that experience, because it seems like, okay, here's 2 data points right here where we did tutorials, and that was kind of like the impetus to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm definitely, like, I can talk about my experience for a sec, because I think it's rather similar. Like, I also came up around a tool community. Like, in the beginning, I was very dedicated to the R community. That was the thing. R, ggplot, all that stuff, RStudio, which was nice because I think they have a particularly strong and, like, welcoming community just among all the tools that I've used and communities I've been a part of. So I think, you know, that's another thing to consider. Like, if you're at the very beginning of your journey and you're thinking like, what tool do I want to use, or what do I want to learn first, or something like that, you know, that is a factor that I would consider. Certainly not the only factor, but a big, welcoming, supportive community is really helpful for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the promotion. And so that was what I started doing. And I was learning stuff as I went. And, you know, some of it I would post on Twitter. I would not add all of it to my portfolio for sure, because a lot of it, you know, I was aware like this is just you know, a fun thing that I did to learn, but that doesn't mean it needs to go in your portfolio. And along the way, as I was doing that, I was also blogging. So I was creating blogs, which felt nice because it didn't feel as official as a portfolio. Like, it didn't feel like, here is the best thing I've produced. And the blogs were written in very much a way like, you know, I am a total beginner, but like, here was my experience trying to learn this tool or this thing. And, you know, for other beginners, that's usually the most helpful kind of thing to read, is like someone else's beginner experience, because, you know, you get the problem of when you're too experienced in writing a tutorial, you like skip over some of the details and stuff. You know, you don't remember what it's like to be a beginner and not to have some of that knowledge. So, you know, if you're in that position, don't think you're too early to be writing blogs or anything.
So can you give some like concrete examples, Will, of things that you turned into tutorials?
Yeah, I mean, I had various random you know, like I think I did some, let's see, I would come up against a problem. Like some of them were very like technical and coding based. I would come up against a problem like, I don't know, like how to find linear combinations with R in like the tidyverse with like a specific, very, very niche thing. And I was like, here, I didn't know how to do this thing. Here's how I figured it out. Like I put, here's all the things that didn't work. Like here was the problem. I tried this, it didn't work. I tried this, it didn't work. And then like, here's my eventual solution. Even in the end, like I will say, looking back on it, you know, that particular post, it was a really terrible solution now in hindsight, but like someone found it useful.
Matter.
Yeah, like it did work. And like some people, I had people like messaging me being like, oh, thanks, I love this post, it really helped. So I was like, okay, great. But I think, yeah, the best examples would probably be like the generative art blogs that I did, which was really nice because it was both tutorial, blogging, and it was producing stuff that I, like some of it I put in my portfolio.
How did you decide, Will, between the stuff that you kept as a blog and the stuff was like, oh, this is good enough to port over to a portfolio page?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I think that I tried to keep for the portfolio. I mean, you certainly have an inherent feeling of like, this is something I'm very proud of, right? And so I think you can tell, like, even when you're learning, I would say like take the top 10% of your stuff that you're the most proud of. Like if someone said right now, what are the like 3 projects you would show? If someone said, show me 3 things and 3 things only, and then like take that and like start with that as your portfolio. And so that's what I did. I definitely tended to choose the more like flashy artistic stuff. And like I had things that were certainly more standard kind of like data analysis, data sciencey things, because that's what I was doing at the time. And one thing I would do is keep a public portfolio of like the flashier stuff. And then if I was applying for a job or something where like the skills were more on that kind of data analysis side of things, I would just send them that as part of my portfolio. And it didn't need to be a public thing that I showed everyone as an example of like, this is my work that I want to do. And I think it's so great. But like, if it's really relevant to a job, I still do that today. I have several projects that are not on my public portfolio that I send to people when I apply for jobs because, maybe it's not totally representative of what I want to do, or it's a little too niche, or there's other, it doesn't totally fit like the aesthetic that I want or something, but I still think it's like useful for a job application for them to know I have this skill.
Yeah, it's relevant to those specific things that they want from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the ways that I chose what to put in the portfolio. And the other thing I think I would really keep in mind is your portfolio doesn't have to stay and shouldn't stay the same all the time. So I take projects off my portfolio a lot. And so in the beginning, when I had less projects, I put more things on there. And then as I built up more and more projects that I was prouder of, I would look back and say like, oh, that's kind of an older, like, like that doesn't really represent the kind of work that I do anymore, or it's just not as good as these other projects, or for whatever reason, I think it's better to just curate and move that off the portfolio.
It's interesting though.
Sorry, Gary, go on.
Go ahead. No, I found it interesting because this idea of you changing your portfolio type, that's a public portfolio, but you are also saving some for the client, like because when we talk about portfolio, people think like, this is my website, this is a cool thing I do, but really you could use this kind of things that are more student work, a learning opportunity, a blog post, and present that to a client or an employer, and that may not be public on your website, but it might be enough to get you an interview. So you don't always have to have a live website, I guess, sometimes. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it is good to have like a place on the web where people can, if they Google you and they want to know your work, they can just go and like see some of the stuff that you think is like you're really proud of, that's like really cool looking, that shows off well, because that's a way for like inbound people, people to find you.
Yeah, it's an entry point, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's an entry point. Yeah. But like today I do this. So like when I apply for jobs, the most recent jobs I've applied for, I do send them like the link to my website, but that's not what I send them as the portfolio. I make a separate portfolio in Figma that I've curated specifically the projects I think are relevant to this job. And I, write more about them, writing specifically to the job application. If it's a job application for like more of a UX or kind of thing, then I'll focus on that. Like, how did I tackle those challenges? If it's more for the, data stuff, then I'll do that. So like you can completely tailor, like your portfolio is not a static thing, and it's not just one thing.
It's like a resume, right? The advice you get is to tailor your resume for every job application that you make. It's exactly the same with a portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one point I would like to make is that even if you do have something that's not on your website, a portfolio, it's maybe a private portfolio, you're constantly updating, you're customizing it. I would recommend having those blog posts and having a blog up and talking about your process, because I kind of had that through my podcast where people could hear me thinking through things and interviewing other people. And then when you're applying for a job, people can go see your kind of public work, and they kind of get a sense like they know you already. They know how you operate, what your thought process is, and any bonus head up, no, head start.
Advance warning.
Whatever I'm trying to say, you know what I'm trying to say. Whatever head start you can get, leg up, whatever leg up you can get.
Just random body parts in random directions.
However
Like
you can elevate
whatever
yourself.
knee sideways.
Try to do that because it's a competitive market out there. I know I don't need to say that. Everybody knows that. But if you can stand out amongst all the other applicants because the hiring manager feels like they know you, it's a win.
It's also one of the things that stands out to me is this idea of like you can't be a beginner and expose the fact that you're a beginner. I think there's a bit of this tendency of like, oh, I'm showing my portfolio. It has to be professional work. It has to be client work. It has to be like industry work, where I think most of us have started, and we haven't completed the circle, but most of it have started with a tutorial, like beginning classes, and still got the job through that because of standing out as a candidate, because you were more personal or you describe your process better, and you don't have to niche right away. Like none of you guys were like, I'm going to niche into R, and it wasn't like that. It was like trying out stuff and like show that, and that's enough sometimes to get hired.
I think also that it's not the case that every client wants the best thing possible. Every client wants the best thing possible within their budget. And if their budget is small, they will be looking for somebody who might be more early career. And if you can make that a selling point in your favor.
Well,
Yeah,
employers. Same thing.
Yeah, can you imagine a hiring manager sees someone who's trying to learn new things and trying to teach it to other people? Like, I want that person on my team. That's like a nice
Absolutely.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. We have a lot of that. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people like that are students coming right out of school. For Axios, we hire a lot of early career people. And so a lot of the portfolios I see are like largely student work. It's like, I did this for a class. I did this project for my thesis or for my whatever class I was taking. And that stuff is not like, there's no like downgrade of that type of work. That's equal to any other kind of work. So, definitely, yeah, don't be shy about like, oh, I don't have like professional work to put in my portfolio or anything.
Specifically, if they are I think what we worry of, at least what I remember when we hire here or when I like look at other people's portfolio, I think there's the sense of like, well, if it's a personal portfolio, you did whatever you wanted, which is easier. It's actually somewhat harder to do whatever you want as a personal project. So I think if you can show that they were constraints, or that in a class usually you have like a brief and some kind of framework of things you have to do, that's just like client work. That's just like an employment work. It's just the same. Like you have constraints, you have those like colors you have to use. So I think showing that, even if you show a personal project, and it also will help you do personal project, in my opinion, putting constraint in advance of like, I only work in this format, I'm not allowed to touch the fonts, I'm not allowed to touch the colors, or I only work with this type of data set or this software, is really valuable for an employer of like, oh, they can respect the brief. Pretty much.
Or show a need too. I think that's the thing that my bike route viz did well. I mean, I didn't like nobody a client didn't ask me to do that. Like, hey, we need this. Can you make this map? Right. But I kind of like walked backwards into something that solved a problem, would be helpful to someone. So if you can show even after the fact, like, hey, this visualization served a purpose and helped someone, that's a huge bonus. Will, was that everything that you had? Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think I would just emphasize like really, really take advantage of those community initiatives, because a lot of the stuff that I did while I was learning and for my portfolio was that stuff. So, in R, they did a initiative Tidy Tuesday, which was like every Tuesday they have like a data set and you're supposed to take it and do something with it, make a project, make a visualization out of it. And there's lots of these, there's Viz for Social Good, there's Makeover Monday, where it's the same thing. And this is really good because there's already like a set community around it. There's deadlines, which is good. So, you actually have to finish it. And then once you're done, you can post it and, hashtag Makeover Monday or whatever, and other people will retweet it and you'll get all this engagement. And so I think these are really helpful ways, especially when you're starting out and still learning.
Yeah, having that community of fellow travelers is so important. And I say this like, even it's not because we run a community like this. The reason why we run a community like this is because it is so important, and we've found it so valuable in, when we were learning. So yeah, we wanted to help other people have that, basically. But yeah,
we made
find
a
that
little mini community. Like, that's our mini community. We're like struggling. So
Right.
we just
Yeah,
pull
exactly.
together.
So, find a community. If you can't find a community, make a community. Just assemble some like-minded folks and learn together. It's a superpower for bringing all of you up together. It's incredible.
Duncan, you want to share yours?
Sure. So I'll talk about a couple of projects. So one of them is a little bit similar to the experience that you had earlier, Ali, which is a piece that I made called, I've made two pieces called Boom and Bust, actually. One of them is an episode of the Loud Numbers podcast, but the other one before that was a data visualization made on my pen plotter. And I used data from Our World in Data. I used their chart on, it's a connected scatter plot on oil prices and demand over time. And it was really useful to use their data because when I made it, I hadn't seen anyone doing any data viz on plotters before. So that's kind of why I made it. And I just kind of wanted to experiment with this new thing. But when I made it, I posted it on Twitter. I posted it on YouTube, and then I linked it on Twitter, and I tagged Our World in Data again, and they got super excited about it, and they were retweeting it, and I got a private message from one of them saying, this is incredible, really cool that you did this. And that, immediately put me in contact with, some of the people that run what is, I think, probably one of the biggest data viz sites in the world these days, right? So you can definitely gain not just kind of attention and promotion for yourself there, but you can also make networks and connections that can then be helpful, down the line. And I think that's quite an interesting and useful way to approach it.
Yeah, connections are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that I was going to talk about was my Space Dogs data visualization, which you can find at duncangear.com/spacedogs. Maybe one of you can throw the link in the chat while I'm talking. And I just kind of wanted to talk with that one about where I got the data and the information from. There are some data sets that you see used a lot. I'm sure that you can all name some examples.
The Titanic data set.
The Titanic data set is one of them. There are all kinds of data sets that you often see used. And I think what can really bring a project forwards is to find a data set that not everyone else is always using, and that might mean assembling it yourself. So in the case of the Space Dogs one, I pulled it out of the back of a book. It was written in a list in the back of a book, and I just basically digitized that and then made a visualization of it. As far as I'm aware, that data set did not exist on the internet before that.
Wow. Oh, cool.
So I think that can be a really, really useful thing to do. But you don't have to go to all the effort of finding a book and copying things out of it. What you can do is look for newly published research. There are all kinds of nonprofits who are publishing reports all of the time, and they will have some data in there. And if you can come up with a creative, interesting way of visualizing that data, and publish it and then tag them or something, you will probably be the first person outside of their organization to work on it if it's new, and they will be super excited that you are using their work and bringing it to a new audience. So they will probably then share it through their channels again, and you get that effect. So yeah, my thing there is find some data that everyone else is not using, put a little bit of effort into what is going into your visualization, in the interest of finding something interesting and new and exciting.
I feel like we need to kind of note the data is plural newsletter. I think it's weekly, and there's just so many data sets. I mean, sure, that's going out to a lot of people, that newsletter, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So you can find something pretty obscure to create.
Yeah, I mean, I think like maybe about a year ago, they published a data set of like all the lighthouses in England and Wales in like the 1800s or something like that. And I just sort of like, I saw it come in and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I immediately just like threw it in QGIS and like made something really quickly out of that and then put it on Twitter. And about, I think 3 or 4 people replied to me and was like, oh, I saw that data set and I was thinking about making something.
Yeah.
So, just be the first person to do it.
We I think Will and I made a list somewhere in Elevate blogs. We have a list of like, I think there's like 40 different sources of data set that are unknown and less common than that. So maybe it's your time to sign up to Elevate and the marketing moment. But we have made those lists. We also use those. Yeah. So we actually made a list of websites, and one website that had like hundreds of them.
Yeah, definitely. I will also just like second and third and fourth what Duncan said about collecting your own data, especially if you're aiming to do, so what I mentioned with these kind of like community projects and stuff is like when you're sort of building your skills, you're just making like a little one-off chart or something here or there, some smaller projects. But especially I think if you're aiming to make a bigger project, more of a, longer thing or a longer form thing, something a little bit more in depth, almost all of the best projects that I've seen in that category collected their own data, one way or another. So there's many ways to do that. But, there's one of my favorites is just watch your favorite TV show and collect some data about it. It could be anything.
You did that, right, Will?
Yeah, I've done that multiple times, and none of those projects are published, but I do have the data.
Watch too much TV, don't do enough personal project.
Yes, that is actually a real danger, is when you're doing this, set boundaries for yourself on like where you're going to stop, how much you're going to collect, make it manageable. But yeah, I mean, movie data sets, these are things that you can do, like anything pop culture related, I think. And there's no magic to it. It's not like there's some trick to collecting data. It's just you open up a spreadsheet and sit down with your movie or your book or whatever you're doing and just start typing.
Or you could do data collection, like in terms of like gathering attributes for a particular thing. Like over the weekend, my kids and I did like an apple tasting, and I made a bunch of radar charts with attributes, and they were just like tasting an apple and say like, this one is high sweetness and low tart, and you could easily, just in an afternoon, you were gathering that data, and it took like an hour, and then create the visualization.
I will say a really good, sorry, Gabby. A really good example.
Personal data, but go ahead.
Yeah, personal data. So yeah, like that's a great example is if you looked at any of like Giorgio Lupi's work, it's a lot of personal data collection. Sonia Kuipers, if you look at like her website, she has tons of personal projects that are about like, reading a book, like some of her favorite books, some of her favorite TV shows, her favorite music, her favorite clothes, her favorite like makeup, these are all things that, you just go out to the store, do some research. And so that's a really good, those are some really good examples, I think, of personal projects where you collect your own data and it ends up very cool and unique and interesting and it stands out.
Yeah. Duncan, was that everything you had on yours?
I think so. I was quite quick, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Efficient.
Was that really early on, though? I feel like those projects were more recent for you.
I mean, Space Dogs was like 3.5 years ago now, something like that.
Okay.
And Data Plotter was 2.5 years ago. It was the first year of the pandemic. So time passes.
Oh, yeah, I know. Those still feel new. How about you, Gabby?
It's hard to place for me, like what were the first project. I think mainly my attitude was, first, contrary to a lot of you, I did not know that Dataviz was a thing for like until like a year ago. Maybe not, but kind of. And so there was this thing of me. I knew I was actually more driven to like infographics and PowerPoint presentation when I was working more as a researcher / biologist. So for me, it was more, I would take any opportunity that I could at work, in my internship, at school, to make design stuff. I didn't know it was Dataviz at the time. I didn't know it was whatever. I was like, I have a PowerPoint. I'm going to spend 40 hours on my PowerPoint and like 2 hours on the actual like physics that comes with it. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of people that are transitioning, like me, from another field to actually use their own work, like their workplaces, to try to practice, because it gives them like real data set. They get paid for their time spent on this, like, you know. And then maybe also transitioning within the office to a new role. I know a lot of people have done that.
And
so if you're in a
you
new
know the
field-
nuances behind the data, which is often really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And you're working with like real people that are going to use the database potentially, like are actually going to interact with it. So it's actually a great like you have everything that's like a work. You're not doing the job, it's not your title, but if you are, you might get really good feedback. And I was lucky enough that my first position at the French NIH, they were really willing to let me do that. So I got the opportunity to work with designers and by myself on like a bunch of infographic. I think my very first one was made with a free like online software with like icons. It was really terrible. Maybe I'll show you the example. It was really bad. But it was like a poster for a hospital to like recruit for a clinical study. And they let me do it. They were like, you want to, you know, we can make paragraph, but we could also make a visual. So you want to do it, go ahead, have fun. So I think that's my very first project was more related to actually work, like working within my own workspace. And school the same. Even when I went to night classes for design, it was just design and more branding, and everything I did was related to database. I was just like, I like infographic stuff, so every time I'm gonna have to learn branding, it's gonna be related to science, and I'm gonna make it. I didn't think of it that way. It was just like, this is the thing I'm passionate about. So this place for that to also find things, apply database to any. If you're not right out of school and you don't even know, if you already know you're like in another field, you can use your own work, your own studies, your own school to create new things. And it's great parameters, great constraint already. There's more, but I don't want to go on forever.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about, I think the two big places people go or try when they're like, okay, I just need fodder for my portfolio, is either they reach out to a nonprofit and or like try to find free work or say yes to free work. So maybe we can tackle nonprofit thing first. I can say from my experience, because I've tried this too, it is hard because even though you would probably work for free for a nonprofit, for maybe a charity that you care about, it still costs them in time of their employees. So they have to figure out, like, if they don't have an immediate need, they're gonna have to like look for something for you to do, or they're gonna have to have a million meetings with their internal teams to find something for you to do. So a lot of times they don't even respond, or they say yes and then never get back to you. That was kind of my experience. But one experience that did work out is that I connected with either the communications person, I think, on the this nonprofit that does like Parkinson's research. It's it was a communications person, and I just said, hey, I'm a database designer. If you ever need anything, let me know. I would love to volunteer, make a few charts for you, that if it would be helpful. And we hopped on a call, and we got to know each other a little bit. And then a year later, they reached out and like, hey, we have something. So I think it will work, but just you can't take it as something that's going to happen ASAP necessarily.
Yeah, it's about planting seeds and then waiting for those seeds to grow.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a smart gardener plants a lot of seeds.
Yeah. So, and maybe if you reach out to quite a few places and say, hey, I'm available, I'm trying to build my portfolio, love to do some free work for you, make a free chart, putting parameters around it so they don't like, hey, build us a website. Be like, if you have one static chart, just put some sort of parameters around it and tell them when you're available, whatever.
And make sure as well that it's something that you like doing. So like, don't volunteer to do stuff that you are good at but you don't enjoy, because if you're going to be doing it for no money, you need to enjoy it.
It needs to be something you can put in your portfolio, and it's going to help you get that job. So have it be something that you maybe specifically say that, like, I'm specifically looking for creating an interactive chart in D3, or whatever specific thing that you want to put in your portfolio in order to get a job with
Yeah.
that portfolio. That's a good point.
In language that they will understand. They might not necessarily know what D3 is, for
Right.
example, but yeah.
Maybe send some examples. Duncan, you had an idea. What was it? Oh, you said someone asked something similar in office hours, and I think you said to redesign a chart that they already have out there, which I think is a really great solution, because you can just be like, "Hey, I made this," and they might be like, "Oh yeah, that's great. Could you do it again?"
I think so too. I think if you're gonna do it for free, you might not need the authorization. Maybe you do it and you send it being like, "Hey, I made something. If you like it, you can put it on your website." That works too. You don't always need to ask for the permission. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. You still have it. All good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of this. This is actually something we talked about in the office hours I had lately, because some people were asking about pitching their projects to, like, kind of getting that first published project, especially like in journalism or freelancing or that kind of work, and pitching and all of that stuff. And I gave an example of a system that I like to use where, like, you make something that is just interesting to you and you would want to make it anyways as a personal project. And then if you have an idea that, like, this could fit in a publication, you pitch it you basically build the whole project as if you're going to do it for your personal project. And then you can pitch it to them and say, "Hey, I made this thing, happy to work with you and edit it, of course. Would you be interested in publishing this?" And if they will, then great. Thumbs up, you got a bonus, like, you get some money for it. And if not, then there's, like, no harm done, and you can just publish it on your own as a personal project. So this is exactly what happened with this Scientific American thing that I published, this hurricanes thing. I didn't make that, I didn't pitch that to them before I made it. I just made it first because I wanted to. And then afterwards I thought, this would be really, this would fit for them. So I pitched it and they happened to want it.
And it doesn't have to be as big as Scientific American too. It can just be like that blog, that Arlington, Virginia bike safety blog, that I had. Right. It doesn't have to be giant. Any publication by a third party is like, that's good.
Here's a question for you, Will. How long should you wait for a reply? Because in my experience, publications and people, they can be pretty slow at replying. And they, you are much more likely to get no reply at all than you are to get a negative reply.
Yeah, that's true. You will very rarely get a negative reply. That is true. I mean, I would
just get ghosted.
Yeah, you get ghosted. I would send an email. So the thing is that you need to identify where to send your work, right? And so by far, like, a lot of publications may have information on their website about, if you have pitches, send them here, pitch at NewYorkTimes.com or whatever. I always think
never use those.
Yeah, like, don't use those. I mean, you can, but
it's a red herring.
It's the way to pitch things is to find someone who works in that department at that organization and pitch directly to them. So, when I pitched to Scientific American, I sent an email directly to Jen Christensen, who's the graphics director at Scientific American. So I know it's going to the right place, someone who understands this work, someone who's interested in this stuff.
It's work to find the right person to pitch to, but that work is worth doing. Yeah,
absolutely. And as far as how long you should wait, I mean, I would send an email. If you don't get a response within a week, you can send a quick follow-up. Hey, did you see this? And, because a lot of times people just forget. It's not rude to send a follow-up or anything. And then if you don't get any response after that, then it's over and just move on.
It's over. Yeah. And just because it is over and you have to move on, that does not mean that your work sucked. Like, that is a really important thing for you to internalize. Like, it just means that it doesn't fit what they're interested in editorially right now, or they are too busy,
at that time.
or they don't have any budget, or like, there's a million reasons that aren't your work sucking that they might not get back to you.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about getting work with that, like, purely personal project? I feel like often we get those questions of, like, should I work for free? Should I work for a nonprofit? But also, like, it feels like, because people feel like they need to work for someone else to get something in their portfolio. But maybe we don't. Maybe we just need to have, like, purely personal project. And how do we sell that?
Is there value in having a third party say this is good enough that I paid for it, kind of thing?
Part
Like,
of
that's
it
what
also
right?
is someone setting the boundaries, because that's a lot of work, setting your own constraints.
Mhm.
It is a lot of work, and it's like, where do I even?
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. It's like, where do I even?
I will say that so I think my opinion is that if you're like early career, we're talking about maybe this is like your first job or you're trying to switch careers or something, like you're new to the industry, then it really doesn't matter at all. I think personal projects are completely fine. If I'm hiring for like a senior level position, then yes, like it's important that you have professional experience of some type.
Can we precise though that I get hired systematically for only my personal work almost because I don't publish work. Like, so I'm just saying there's some, like my portfolio
Yes.
when I sell to my client is rarely client work because they put too much
Yeah.
creative limitations. It's very rare. So
I mean, this is quite an interesting thing because generally client projects are much less exciting and experimental and all of this than your portfolio will probably want to be. Like, clients will often get really, really excited to see you doing experimental stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want you to do it for them. That's the funny thing. It's a bit weird that way, but that seems to be how it works.
Yeah, I should clarify. So like, I think the reason it's important if you're like later middle to senior, like, portion of your career to have like some professional work is not because that work is going to be the most impressive and is going to get you the job. Like, still probably your personal project is going to be the really cool thing. But, once you get to that point in your career, like, you would expect in a portfolio that someone has, a decent body of work built up. And to me, it would be a red flag if like you have this really impressive portfolio full of amazing projects and really cool stuff, and your resume, like, you have no professional, like no one's ever hired you, you've never worked for anybody, you've never published anything. Because then I would just be like, well, why? Like, why haven't, why have you spent, 3 years publishing all these amazing projects, but no one has ever hired you? Like, what's wrong with you?
it's the dropping name game. Sometimes you just have to
Right.
drop the names. You don't have to show them what you did for them, but you can drop the names.
Well, and it shows important skill. I mean, it shows other stuff that I think is really important. Like, the thing that I'm thinking about is that, to me, that would send up a red flag of like, okay, so is this person hard to work with? Like, are they not collaborative? Are they not able to function as part of a team? Are they too, like, they're so reserved, they can't reach out or something? Like, there's skills, there's like the data viz skills and the, the information design and all that skills. And then there's, everything else in the job, which oftentimes is like, 50% or more of the work is not sitting there doing data viz. It's, it's collaborating with people, it's getting on calls, it's editing, it's like brainstorming, and so all those interpersonal skills and things are really important.
Can I ask quickly before we move on? So I think what I want to do here is acknowledge that the advice we are giving here is for people who are neurotypical, and that if you are not neurotypical, then this can absolutely be a tricky thing for you to navigate.
Yeah.
To put you on the spot here a little bit, Will, what advice would you give there? Do you have, like, can you share any advice there as somebody who's sort of like working in this more commercial environment, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so like, are you saying what advice would I give to someone who's like, neurodivergent,
who does struggle with some of these things, because that's their brain works differently to other people?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
How would they navigate that challenge of demonstrating those skills?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that
being expected to demonstrate those skills, let's say.
Yeah, I don't think it means, so for example, I should clarify, like, it doesn't mean that you are behaving in a particular way, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you have to be outgoing, for example, or, you have to be like super, communicative and like taking the initiative and reaching out all the time to people or anything like that. I think it just shows that, you need a way to show, like, either through people that you have worked with in the past, or examples where you have worked in a setting where you get constraints and have to talk to clients and things like that, to show that you have experience, going through those situations and producing successful work. Not necessarily that you had to experience those situations in the same way that everybody else does.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Like it's about showing that you have, like, the steps involved.
Yes.
Like it's just a kind of about process and familiarity with that process. And just like being able to navigate that process, even though, I think everybody knows that maybe like 1/3 of processes, probably like 2/3, something goes wrong, and that you and that you have some experience of things going wrong, and you can recover from things going wrong. And it's just about that, like having walked that path a few times.
I think relatedly, it's really just showing that you fulfilled a need for someone. Because I think that's what getting the third party publishing really does, is like, hey, this wasn't just like, for me, the tree set, the tree health data set with Mapbox, like, sure, it's like a black map with dots on it, so it kind of looks cool, right? It's not like something the average Joe could do, but I don't think it doesn't mean as much if it doesn't fulfill someone's need, and it kind of going through that extra effort of getting it published in the third party publication is showing, hey, I just didn't click and create this map that doesn't matter to anybody. I am solving problems with real data through my design skills. I think that's really what you're trying to show.
I find it hard because all those examples are like, well, I do this and it was useful and somebody took it. I guess I'm standing in a different position when no one took my work and it was just living on Instagram and I still get jobs out of it. So I guess I have a complete different experience.
Well, I mean, you can get jobs, right? But like that wasn't like you get the first job, right? So like all these things that I'm saying about like, oh, it's good to have third party validation. This is for like way down the road when you're aiming, much higher. You're applying for like senior editor of whatever at this publication, or you're pitching your, for freelance clients to like, Google and like big companies, and like this is when you're very much later in your career. Earlier on, like you have your Instagram, you have your Behance, whatever, your portfolio, and you don't have any professional like third party work. That's no problem. Like you will get clients, just from good work.
But it's also but also I would say, because it feels like then the personal project don't matter later on, which is also not true, because we have this balance of like professional and personal, and like if you want to explore more and grow as a designer, potentially you might need to have more personal exploration
and
even while you and experiment. I need to have both. I was just thinking, just clarifying, because for some of the people that might read the video, they might not be at that stage already of like more senior and need to have those names. So I just wanted to, it's okay. I really think that it's completely okay, especially if you're starting up, you change career, to have only personal or student work in your portfolio. I don't think, especially for junior position, that we expect them to come up with clients or even be republished. I think it's great. It's definitely not done. Don't get me wrong. Like it looks good, but it doesn't have to be. And you can display some of the thinking that Ali is telling about solving a problem without having a real client or even aiming for one. And sometimes you can also do that accidentally. But I also agree that you can do pretty things just to do pretty things. Maybe you do pretty things to show a specific skill in that case. Not so much solving a problem.
For sure.
There's also something, it's like, I'm aware that we're getting to time here, but there's something else that I want us to talk about explicitly. We've sort of implicitly answered this question, I think, a few times on the call, but explicitly, should you work for free? Like that is a question that people have very strong opinions of in the industry.
It's so hard. Yeah, because there's a lot of things.
Okay, can we define free and in what conditions too? Because is it, for instance, working for free for my personal project? It is working. It is for free. I don't get paid for it. 100%. I'll do it every day, and I do it quite often.
Yeah, for yourself.
Do I work for? Yeah, do I work for somebody for free who contacted me and asking me to work for free? Well, that depends. Is this an NGO? Is this a portfolio piece that I can put in my portfolio? Or they just ask me to work for free because they want to take advantage of me? I think there's a condition here of like, if you feel like you're getting taken advantage of, it might not be worth it. However, there are some conditions where you're gonna get something great out of it, even though you get taken advantage of. The benefits is better. I have a great example for this one. One of my first bigger infographic that was made for, now I forgot the name. an institute that studies anything related to LGBTQ communities in LA. I was applying to a job and they asked me to do free work. Which my take on free work usually is no, not for getting a job. You have a portfolio, that's what it's made for. However, when you're junior, sometimes you don't have the portfolio, so maybe you do an extra, But in that case, I was like, if I'm going to do something for them, and I don't get the job, it needs to be valuable for me and my portfolio.
Yes.
And it's actually one of the things that gave me some of the first, job client work, that infographic. I forgot how it's called. But and it was made for someone else to apply for a job for free. But I gave it my all, knowing that it would be a portfolio piece because it came with a brief, it came with everything. So in that case, I worked for free. Today, if somebody was contacting me to say, hey, for this position, you have to prove yourself work for free, I would 100% say no.
Yeah. The way that I always looked at that stuff too is like, specifically, how is this benefiting me? Like, you really needs to be like, if they're just,
There are so many things that you can get out of a project. One of those things is money. So what are some of the other things, right? There's experience. There is exposure, even though everyone is like, exposure. There is...
No, it's 100% a thing. It's such a thing.
Yeah.
There's connections. What else? What are some other things? Let's brainstorm a little list here of things that people should be weighing up when they decide whether to take on a project or not.
Which ones did you say already? Exposure.
Make a list already.
I feel like you already said them all.
There was money, experience, exposure, connections. I think another one of them is like impact and like pride. Like
I think so.
I do work absolutely at a lower rate when I know that I'm going to be able to have a lot of positive impact on things that I care about in the world. Like I'm absolutely happier to accept less money in those situations. And in some situations, I'd be willing to work pro bono. And, if I know it's a small organization that doesn't have a big budget, then I'm open to having conversations around that.
Yeah. I would just say a few practical tips. So things to like watch out for. Be extremely cautious about saying yes to work for a corporation, like a for-profit corporation.
Yes.
Right. I would say very rare is the circumstance where you'd want to do free work for a for-profit corporation. Also do your research when it comes to NGOs, and nonprofit does not mean, has very little money and doesn't pay their employees and everything. Like nonprofits can have tons of money and be super, super rich, or they can just be like a scrappy group of a few people trying to make a difference. So those are two very different things, and make sure you're clear which one you're doing. The other thing would be, just keep in mind, like we've talked about all these things, what are you getting out of it? What do you want to do? And maybe you get an offer for some free work from an organization and it sounds so great. You think, oh my gosh, I've been wanting to learn this skill. It would give me such great exposure. I'll make connections. Keep in mind that there's always going to be more pressure, more stress, and downsides when you're doing work for someone else. So, even if you're working for them for free, be very clear about like, is there a hard deadline on this? Like, what is the deadline? Are you going to keep me to that? Like, if how much am I going to have to work? Are you going to be saying I need to work X number of hours to get this done on time? How many edits are we going to get? All that stuff that we talk about with freelancing. Are you going to come back and give me tons and tons of feedback and expand the scope of the project and be asking me to do lots of stuff? And
clear about the scope.
Yeah, to be clear, like those things can be negatives, but they can also be positives. Like being edited is a really good thing. Having a deadline is a really useful thing.
You need to be clear about the scope and make the scope as small as possible. I think for the free work, just make it as tiny and encapsulate it as much as you can.
Exactly. You just want to discuss these things ahead of time so you don't get taken advantage of, essentially.
I would actually say get a contract, because to me, I feel like even when, and I'm just like Duncan, I do a lot of work for almost free at that point. It's almost like on principle, I'll charge them something just to make sure, and that establish a relationship where I'm not free, like I'm not your random design slave. And I'm sorry to bring that up, but it happens sometimes that I don't think they mean it even in a way. Sometimes nonprofit, they just fall into that thing of like, oh, we have this person, it's great, let's just dump everything on them. and you end up
Mhm.
working like a
Yeah, the
full-time
contract
job
slows
for
them down
free.
a little, right? Like, oh, we have to actually
Yeah.
define a scope. We have to put it in a contract.
I
It
think
slows
so.
down
And
the
maybe it doesn't have to be
email.
as official as and I got into a situation where that happened and I had to put like literally be like, it went wrong. It went really wrong and I have a terrible relationship with some of them. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to put those boundaries so that there's no also personal emotion of like, well, she's not or they're not doing the work that we agreed on, but like nobody agreed on that work and now it's becoming overwhelming and I'm still working for free.
Yeah. If they're in too much of a rush to get a contract sorted, that isn't always a red flag, but it definitely can be a red flag for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to say something else in terms of a benefit. If they say that, you do the scope, make the scope as small as possible, maybe you have a contract, it's going to be for free, but think about other things you can get out of it. Like get it in writing that they're going to write you a testimonial that you can put on your site next to make sure you can put it in your portfolio and they're going to give you a testimonial. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, or that they'll post it on their social media and tag you in the
tag
post.
you.
The exposure, yes.
Ask how
I
much,
think the exposure is massive.
Yeah, push what they're going to do for you. And because there's a lot of things that aren't money that actually might work better for you when you're first starting and trying to get the couple things in your portfolio. And really nice blurb is huge too. Someone saying this really made a difference in our whatever.
Testimonial, the exposure of being tagged on all social media on their website, and the authorization of adding the work in your portfolio. And that's true also for paid project. I think there's a massive advantage and benefits. And sometimes actually it's part of the financial, like thinking of money for us as freelancers of like, if I can't put the work in my portfolio, I'll charge you more because you're taking away from my business. So even if you're working for free, a lot more, 300% more. but it is, I think it's important if you do free work that it's very clear that it is public, that they need to state your name and that you are allowed to use the work in your portfolio, quoting their name too, you're not hiding. It's double-sided, beneficial for everyone. But I think it's exposure is so important. Putting again the name of a tier person that's validating your work is like it's how you get a new job. So work for free, yes, but not before exposure too.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's great. We covered a lot of stuff, and I hope that you guys were able to pick a few ideas to get your portfolio started, and join us next time for another episode of the Elevate Dataviz Show. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.